Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. I hope this one is working. Last time I did an entire mentor session and it didn't work. It didn't post. So there was a format change. So I just really hope that everything is working, or at least I did it properly this time. So I'm just going to check a couple of settings here to make sure that all of my settings are proper. Looks like they are. Okay, let's see here. All right, so I'll get right to it. And again, I'm going to hope for the best. And with the format change, I do apologize. So I'm just going to try to see how this goes. Okay, so the number one question today is coming from Thomas Payson. The question they asked is, when projects or orders are delayed outside of your control, such as a supply chain issue, what strategies do you use to keep clients happy during these delays? Business description and background of the question is, I am a distributor that brings empty fire extinguishers in from overseas. The order arrived, but it was only extinguishers and no brackets. It is a $750,000 order that I can only partially ship. Good news is the brackets are 3 weeks out. How do I keep going back to my customer with supply chain delays? We are already running late on delivery. Well, I know this seems like the end of the world to you, and I think we've all been in this situation, especially in the COVID era with these supply chain issues. We have certainly worked through projects at my business that have been delayed up to a year because of supply chain issues. And, there's really only one thing that you can really do with your clients, and that is communicate with them every step of the way to provide detail as to where these delays are happening, why they're happening, and know that you remain in their best interest to produce, in your case, these fire extinguishers. I think the natural inclination for an entrepreneur, or one that definitely wants to be client-centric, is to immediately start discounting or offering rebates. And not to say that that's a bad thing to do, but I would be very careful with that being your immediate go-to and trying to make a situation better that was entirely out of your control. This is something completely different than an error on your side or on your team's side. So I would be very cautious, and it's something that we all have to learn, especially, again, if you're client-centric, you want to put your best foot forward. But I would be very careful with how you immediately offer a discount or a rebate. But you know your business and your clientele much better. There could be some other incentives. Maybe there are tag-along offerings or products or services that you can add towards the end post-shipping to make them feel appreciated, or you appreciating their patience with these delays. But I would say the single most important thing is over communicating with your client every step of the way. And one of the things that we like to say here at MVP is constant contact, communication really makes things better, even if there are no material updates. Just having the ability to and the outreach to communicate with your client goes a long way. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. Again, it sounds like you have a good timeline in terms of the impending 3 weeks to get the other brackets out. Maybe there's thinking about it a little bit here on the fly, and maybe there's another supplier or a trade that you can make with another company that they may have those brackets, or maybe you can phase in some type of barter agreement with another company that you could maybe get 5 or 10 of your clients installed while you're waiting for these brackets, and then try to move through the supply chain as it goes on. But regardless, I don't know enough about your business to really make a material suggestion as to how to get through those mechanics, but just communicate. That is by far the best thing that you can do. All right, the next question is coming from Ricardo. The question they ask is, when business networking in an in-person setting, what do you do to meet people and break the ice? What is the best protocol? A little background on the question is, I just joined my local Chamber of Commerce. My question is, how do I maximize the benefits of joining? If anyone has experience with this, how do I approach this? Do you have any tips and ideas for my barbershop to use while at these networking events they have? So the one thing that I've realized over the course of my life and just in business in general is people love to talk about themselves, whether they want to acknowledge it or admit it or not. People talking inherently, by most accounts, people love to hear themselves talk as well as talk about themselves. So I think if you kind of take that approach when breaking the ice at these networking events, because listen, I mean, it's a fairly awkward setting where you're just walking into a room full of strangers, but you do have a commonality, right? You're there. So I think the best approach that I've had is to really ask questions to the person that you're talking, make it about them to break the ice. Maybe what brought them to the event, what their barber services are like, or what element of the industry are they involved in, and just keep feeding questions. And then to develop a rapport by asking questions, you really open up opportunity that it'll just flow as a normal point counterpoint kind of conversation, and then you'll find a commonality. And then once you guys find a commonality together, then it just becomes very easy, and then you can let the conversation navigate pretty organically. And I think even on a sales perspective, one of the things that we try to train our salespeople is to ask as many qualifying questions as possible, and learn about the person you're speaking to or the individual, and just try to find that commonality or an interest point to just keep it nice and organic. Another little trick that I try to use in terms of, I'm horrible with names. I can remember faces. If I see you once, I'll recognize you 10 years from now. It's very interesting, but I won't remember or I've had trouble remembering names. But I read this trick one time where when someone introduces their name to you, just think of a postcard on their forehead, of their name, and just repeat it, as they're saying, hi, my name is Brian, my name is James. Just think of that name written on their forehead. That simple little trick, by calling attention to an area, does something to your brain where it adds that recollection. So I don't know if you have a problem with remembering names or not, but I think at these networking events where you're meeting a ton of people, just put the name on the forehead, or at least try it. It's worked for me on a few occasions. So good luck on your networking event there. Okay, question is coming from Alex Wilkins. Question they ask is, do you think me paying myself less than everyone else on my team is smart? Background of the question is, I have a hardscape and a landscape business. I'm starting to grow. I'm making everything 100% legit. I don't need a ton of money out of the business. I got pretty much everything I need to live life. I was going to pay myself $15 an hour and leave the rest in the business account so I can keep the ship sailing. Does that make sense, or should I pay myself more? I reversed engineered it. If I pay myself $15 an hour, I should be able to save $1K a month in my personal bank account. The business account can grow rapidly. Thank you for your time. So, very good question, and I think this is a entrepreneur dilemma, especially when you're getting started, because the fantasy of owning a business, or the image of owning a business, is all the successes and riches come to the entrepreneur themselves, and it's just, you're going to make it rain immediately as soon as your business gets started. But the hard reality of it is it's the exact opposite. One of the things that I like to say, or at least I've come to terms with, is leaders are last, right? And you, as the leader of your business and your organization, you really have to take a back seat to your personal agenda in terms of, in the short term, personal agenda of what that means of success to you, how you put others, your employees, your colleagues, your customers ahead of you. And so if you take that approach of that, you're serving your industry, you're serving your business as someone that, yeah, you've taken the risk, you put up the capital, you have the talent, But you really have to reverse engineer, to use your term, reverse engineer your mindset in saying you have to take the back seat until you get your systems, your business up and running, where then you can reap the rewards of all of that hard work. But in the initial phases, you 100% do not take an income, well, I don't want to say do not take an income, but if you're if you're in this dilemma, be very strategic. I think you're doing the right thing with not taking or paying yourself. Every penny that you earn from the business needs to be reinvested into the business. It does not go into the watch. It does not go into the car. It does not go into anything that's tangential to the business. It has to go back into the business. If that means, you're making $5 an hour just so you can add another $5 an hour employee to help support your business grow, take that approach. And so if you do that long enough, I promise you'll be able to reach the awards and the accolades and the success financially that you're looking for, in a traditional sense of when a successful business is up and running. Because there will be a point that you will be able to pay yourself first once it's operating and you're profitable. But it takes a lot of longevity and hard work and sacrifice to get to that point. So I think you're on the right approach. Keep that mindset. Your number one goal right now is to grow the business, and then everything else will fall into place thereafter. Okay, next question is coming from Gabriella Binkley. Question she asked is it improper to ask a prospect to avoid sharing details of their financial situation during a sales call or consultation? Business description. I was in a free consultation session with a lead. They wanted to go straight into talking about my pricing because they felt they wanted my services immediately. Once I shared my pricing with them, the lead immediately started talking about their current and recent financial changes and informed me that my pricing was higher than they thought they'd have to pay for the services I was offering. I managed to cut the deliverables down, which would cut down my time also. I gave a new price, but it was still a little high for them. I'm fine with walking away from this inquiry. Well, good. I think, pricing right out of the bat is a catch-22. We try to avoid, price as the immediate talking point to a particular service because, there's rarely a net positive that's going to happen because, one of two things are going to happen. A, you're going to experience what you just experienced, or B, you may undervalue your particular services if you just blindly go into setting a rate card or disclosing a price that you may be leaving money on the table as well because, you may have a client that, is in a much better situation and they think your services are a drop in the bucket when you just talk about price right off the bat. So I think during a sales cycle, you really need to do what's called a needs assessment, right? And the needs assessment is really asking questions about the client, figuring out what their problems are. You're on the phone with them. There is an inkling of interest, right? So they're there for a reason. There's some little hope that what you're providing to them is going to convert into a sale. So continue to ask questions, figure out their needs, and then from there, you can justify your pricing or at least go into establishing how you're going to help them, why your services are priceless, and that any short-term sort of budgetary constraints are going to be nominal in the long run in terms of the success and the value that you're going to bring to them. And so you almost flip it into an education. And right, this is the challenge of sales, and what makes really great salespeople from mediocre ones is being able to break down that price objection with having some really tactful scripts and responses to those objections. And so, financial services are, a unique industry because I know that there's a lot. I think that's what you were in financial services, but there's a lot of commission-based or annuity-based type of income that comes from that. But listen, I think that you're in the right position or in the headspace where if a client or a prospect is going to start with a price objection from the bat, maybe it isn't the right fit for you guys. And you know, you can let them know that even your time is valuable and you're providing a free service as a part of this initial consultation for your products, and having them understand that ability. But I think you're on the right approach in terms of, you know, not punching anyone in the mouth with just pricing and you know, whatever the financial situation is, versus taking a more of a needs assessment approach to figure out how you're going to bring value to them and how that value is a fraction of what their investment is going to be. All right, Selena Medina, next question. What is a good way to develop a business plan? Business description and background is I have a service-based business, tattoos, and I have a ton of ideas and fragments in text, but I really don't know the first thing about writing a business plan. What should I include? Okay, so the very entrepreneurial sort of punch in the mouth kind of approach to that question is there's no better business plan than just to do it, right? You know, executing on your ideas is by far the most valuable education you're going to have in any business. But I do agree that you need to formalize your processes, your product and your services in a way that it's going to give you that confidence to execute. I'd imagine in an industry like yours, you're not necessarily looking to make a presentation to investors or banks just yet, where you need to have a really thought out or structured business plan. But if you're looking for a little bit more structure to get your thoughts onto paper, one of the recommendations I would definitely make is a couple of things. One is the SBA, the Small Business Administration, has a bunch of toolkits for entrepreneurs or new businesses that give you these templates to really look at the forms and the questions that they're asking if you eventually get to that point where you're going to seek any type of loan or funding for your business or your startup costs. That is a very much of a financial minded structure, in knowing like they give you the runway of how banks are going to evaluate your business, what they're looking for and such. So I would dig around at free resources through the SBA to kind of get you established, at least in the headspace of being prepared of the information that you need to really start thinking about and disclosing. The second thing is you could use something free as Google Slides. Google Slides has templates of a wide range of presentation material. Business plans are one of them. So I think for me in particular, you know, having a template that you can work off makes it a little less of a daunting exercise, you know, because right now you're just scrabbling things on a piece of paper. You've got all these ideas, you don't know how to compile them. But if you see something visually that's pointed out in these bullets, you know, that already have paragraph or headers or footers, you know, that's going to help sort of structure your presentation. So I would definitely seek to these templates. But I also think, you know, you should really evaluate, you know, what your total addressable market is, right? You know, how many people in your area you feel are going to need a tattoo, want a tattoo, or your services, and think about the scale of that. You know, what distinguishes your abilities or your services differently from the other tattoo shops in the town. And then lastly is really formalize a sales and marketing plan to get your business out in front of the public, you know, whether it's branding, marketing materials, and, you know, your sales approach as to, you know, how you're going to grow your business, whether that's socially, online, through social media, if it's going to be through print media, so on and so forth. But if you really take a, you know, just structure down into those three or four buckets, you know, there's your business plan, right? Operations, financials, sales and marketing, and your client base, your total addressable market, and your product. Okay, next question is coming from Mark. Question they asked: what processes would be the best to define leap of faith assumptions when trying to bring a product to market that has never been developed before? All right. Background is currently developing non-technical data analytics tool, business intelligence, for small businesses to be able to readily have access to data analytics. We are currently in the period of uncertainty of who our initial target audience will be. Currently working on developing a MVP, minimal viable product, that encompasses KPIs or key performance indicators that most businesses would find successful. We are looking to gather attention off of our basic KPI framework for most businesses. After defining our key assumptions on a target audience, we'll look to present the current MVP and further refine the KPIs to that particular industry or business model. Okay, so you have a good idea, so you have a business idea, and you don't know who you're going to sell the service to or the product to. So I have to ask you, what problem are you solving, and why did you come up with this business plan? What makes you think that it's a good idea, not knowing if it's an actual need in a market, right? I think with any product or service, you need to solve a problem to a degree. You know, what businesses look for, where successful businesses grow, is really comes down to, where do businesses look for a service but they don't know how to get it, right? And so if you think to yourself, you're that business or that service that can bring it to the marketplace, what are your buyers thinking and where are they searching to find you, right? And so what I mean by that is, they don't know that, they may or may not know that they have a problem, but you're going to educate them on their problem, right? And so your business intelligence, I really need to drill down as to exactly, what analytics you're going to provide for them. But if you just think of, your client and the problem that you're solving with this analytics tool, you'll be able to, determine who you're going to go to market with. Now, in most cases, a lot of people have a misconception that starting a business that's never been done before is the easiest path to success. But, I think there's a lot of data and a lot of experience in the group and in the world that shows that, you don't have to be completely unique to be a successful entrepreneur or business. I don't want to say completely unique, but you can do something that's been done before. It's like building a better mousetrap is the analogy, where there's tons of mousetraps, but if yours is a little bit more unique than the traditional ones, then, there's an opportunity for you. But I understand where you're coming from with not, with going to the market and not knowing to a degree who your clients are going to be. You need to figure out what problems you're solving. Start with that question. What problem are you solving for the businesses with your analytics tool? And then I think you'll have a pretty good understanding on who to sell it to. So maybe look at it that way. You definitely don't want to start a business with not knowing your addressable market, but figure out what you're solving, and then I think everything else will kind of come into place with who you target that. All right. Last question here is coming in from Bob. Bob, a question they asked is, leading with price the best way to start a sales conversation with a prospect? I covered this earlier. Short answer, no. But the background of the question is, I am promoting a software and service package that is drastically less expensive than competitors. At the top of my funnel, to get prospects on demo calls, should my messaging be focused just on the price? The goal of my business is to make cybersecurity tools more accessible to organizations by reducing total cost of ownership. The exist solutions for the niche I work have high costs for software licenses and services. I'm developing a super lightweight software solution to solve the same problem at 20% the price of other options. My target companies would have 3,000 employees, and my solution would be priced at 20,000 versus 100,000 by competitors. Wow, I mean that's a quite the spread there. First question is, I think most people are going to ask, are you pricing too low? But going back to your core question, do you want to lead in with price? No. Sure, you just don't want to do that because you don't, again, as I mentioned earlier, you don't want to establish any preconceived notions of what you determine as inexpensive versus your clients. I mean, there could be a business that thinks $20,000 is fall off the chair crazy. So you don't want to sort of punch them in the mouth with like price, because if that's your only competitive advantage, there's going to be someone sure enough that's going to come in at $10,000, right? I think it's really important that if price is that valuable of your service, for sure you can roll that into your messaging, for sure. But you really want to create the value proposition, right? And so, if your messaging is something to the the tune of, are you paying X amount of resources for Y? Our solution provides a low cost, blah, 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 blah. Would you like to talk today and learn more, right? And so you can weave it in without really putting price tags out there. You can talk about costs, value, put, the doubt in your buyer's eyes that they're already paying too much, through your messaging. But I wouldn't go in with just price, or at least a fixed price. It really comes down to that needs assessment. And it sounds like if your competitive advantage is value, great. Find the list of buyers that currently work with a competing platform, and you can go in and just say, I can save your company that $80,000 a year with our software solution. Learn how now. Something to those degrees, and then you get them on the hook. You go through everything that your product and your service does, and then say at the end, and it only costs Y, right? And so the psychological trick there, where it only costs Y, really breaks down the defensive nature of like people bracing for that impact. So I think across the board for everyone on these questions is really developing the needs assessment on your business and your clientele is key to that success. So that was the last question. It was good to be back on here again. I'm hoping that this is posting. I don't know what I did last time, and I'm flying blind here on the platform. But I will talk to you soon, and I hope this is live. All right, have a good day.